Marinette and Usagi have a lot in common. Both must balance their school, love, and social life with their role as world saviors. They act as mentors, emotional support, and a source of knowledge about their powers because one is loved and the other hated. Sailor Moon was not just another anime from the 1990s, it was a revolution for an entire generation. Around the world, if you ask your parents, they surely know this story, and in part, your mother remembers it, and maybe Candy. Usagi Tsukiko, the protagonist of the story, sorry if I said it wrong, was the first clear example that a girl could be brave, magical, and fun, and could save the world. But at the same time, it was a time when most heroes in animation were men, muscular or cold and perfect characters, assets. This ordinary teenage girl appeared out of nowhere with a school uniform, bows in her hair, and a personality far from the traditional hero stereotype. Quite important, I dare say she has inspired many characters, and one of my favorites is Star Wars: The Black. Although the ending is very horrible, unfortunately, I have a video where I explain what happened to this series and how it declined in case you're interested in watching it. She is not a perfect heroine as she is a super broken teenage girl, and I dare say that even with everything we've seen in Goku's evolution, it's still possible she could beat him, and that's precisely what makes her quite special. In the series, we see her as a clumsy girl who cries easily, often arrives late to school, doesn't understand many things, and loves to eat like any normal teenager. Instead of being serious and cold like other action characters, she is quite calm, distracted, and sentimental. But even so, when it really matters, she rises with a certain courage to protect those she loves, fight against evil, and save the world itself. This focus on seeing her human flaws and her ability to do very incredible things made many people at the time identify with her. Practically, I am like that. They have even brought recent stories because they have set the stereotype of the magical girl who has powers and fights against this evil. Even a very eki parody that is very shady. This was especially important for girls who grew up feeling they had to act a certain way to be accepted, so to speak. It showed them that they could be themselves with all their emotions and still be very strong. Moreover, she didn't fight alone. She was accompanied by a group of friends, the Sailor Scouts, who supported her, motivated her, and also had very unique personalities. Together, they demonstrated that friendship among all women could be a pillar of strength, not a source of competition, as this approach was also very valuable because it taught the value of unity, empathy, and teamwork beyond certain stereotypes, leaving a very deep mark because it broke with many cliches of the time. It was the first time that millions of young people saw a girl as the main character, being strong, sensitive, and at the same time real in a very interesting and cosmic way. Now with Marinette, I will talk about the series because the Marinette from the movie shows a better evolution as a character and works very well as it is another format and different from the series itself. So in case they tell me that the movie fixed that, I totally agree. Seriously, give the movie a chance. As a curiosity, her hair was always black, so we've been living a lie all this time, and that's why in the new animation, her hair is black. Throughout the seasons of Marinette, she has been a quite central and beloved figure for many people. However, it has also been the subject of multiple criticisms due to certain attitudes that over time have become problematic. From the beginning of the series, infatuation with Adrian is presented as a rather endearing trait. Sweet and even very interesting. But over time, this admiration starts to take up a lot of time in so many seasons. No, even with the change in animation, it seems the romance doesn't progress much. Even something I don't like, it ruins the protagonist's writing, making her at times quite silly, unbearable, and even selfish, and making certain mistakes she shouldn't make, given everything she's been through and theoretically how she is the heroine protagonist, yet though she shouldn't be like that anymore, but unfortunately, the script is against her. The level of obsession she has with Adrian is also quite strange, although it amuses me in a way, especially in this series that is theoretically aimed at children. My sister is a super fan of this series, and she told me that there were times she didn't like Marinette as the protagonist, but she did like Ladybug because they are two different people, so I consulted with an expert group. But taking one of the most repeated points by disappointed fans, it's that she doesn't show emotional growth. Of course, throughout the seasons, despite experiencing numerous events as she is a heroine, and as a teenager in complex social situations, she keeps making the same mistakes over and over again. She struggles to mature, recognize her own mistakes, and act decisively in her daily life. As a civilian, she is constantly insecure and indecisive and prone to panicking a lot, especially when it comes to anything related to Adrian. This strongly contrasts with her heroic version, whereas Ladybug, she is decisive, strategic, and brave. Although Ladybug is also admired for her bravery and leadership, at certain times she becomes quite controlling by not revealing certain important information to Chat Noir, which is very wrong since he has been her partner from the beginning and she reveals a lot of information to other friends who have been there all along. It's something that seems quite strange to me. Art Papa says that sometimes he treats her really badly, unfortunately making Cat Noir look like a beggar. Now, with Sailor Moon, it's not just a classic anime. We could also say it's a significant cultural phenomenon that changed the way heroines are represented in Japanese animation and global entertainment. It was the series that made her famous in the Mahou Shoujo genre, or magical girls, a style that combines the transformation powers, especially with the shiny costumes, and above all, the message that girls can also be heroines, powerful while still being sensitive and human. Before Sailor Moon, there were already some stories of girls with powers like Sai the Witch or Minky Momo, but none with the impact that this series achieved. Thanks to Sailor Moon, the concept of an ordinary teenager who discovers a magical power, fights against evil, and at the same time experiences romance, school problems, and friendship became a formula that inspired many works such as Canter, Sakura, Pretty Cure, Puella Magid, Macadora Magica, and outside of Japan, series like Ladybug or Wits Club. They wouldn't have the narrative or aesthetic foundations they have today. And something important to mention is not just the visual or commercial impact, but the main character. Because if we differentiate her from the typical perfect heroines, Usagi is quite clumsy, lazy, cries a lot, gets distracted, likes to eat, but still saves the world. That is an approach that many liked about her, because it showed that she didn't need to be perfect to be brave or set aside her tenderness and emotions to fight for what is right. She proved that being very emotional doesn't make you weak and that protecting others can also be done with a certain love. When it aired outside of Japan in the 1990s, it became the gateway to anime for an entire generation. It was not just another cartoon, it had romance, action, drama, comedy, and messages of a certain hope. It promoted teamwork and friendship, had a diverse cast of girls with very different personalities with whom many could identify. They addressed deep themes like sacrifice, identity, acceptance, and destiny, all in a format very accessible for children and teenagers. Decades after its premiere, it remains alive thanks to new movies, remakes like Sailor Moon Crystal, collectible figures, and a loyal fan community that hasn't disappeared. It has inspired many cosplayers, artists, writers, activists, and creators around the world. And its influence is seen even in industries like fashion or pop music. Not only did it entertain, it empowered because it not only showed magic, it showed a lot of heart because it did not idealize the perfect woman. It showed that even with flaws, one can be a heroine. I dare say it is not just an anime, it is a symbol of strength, empathy, and very personal transformation. And that is why it continues to be loved by generations who grew up believing they could also shine with their lunar power. So when Marinette transforms into Ladybug, she automatically takes on the role of a team leader of heroes, but many of us believe that she is not always up to this responsibility. Despite having good intentions, I am not discrediting her, but many of her decisions are sometimes very impulsive, she does not organize well, or they can sometimes be selfish. One of the most criticized points is how she treats Chat Noir at certain times and believes herself to be quite superior. Although they are partners and decide to trust each other, Ladybug constantly underestimates him as if his help were secondary or quite predictable. Furthermore, when something goes wrong, she tends not to take responsibility for her mistakes and rarely apologizes or reflects on them. She often wants to solve everything on her own without even delegating or listening to suggestions, which leads her to make those risky decisions as a team. That is not only dangerous but it shows a lack of trust in others. And there is a very marked difference between her with like Sybil and Marinette as Ladybug, which at first could be a strength in the story, but for many this ends up being an excuse to justify her lack of emotional development. Like Sybil, We already know she's insecure, shy, disorganized, and socially awkward. But as Ladybug, she is determined and brave. But beyond this, she does not evolve, as Marinette remains trapped between these two versions without unfortunately finding a real balance. Worse still, her actions contradict her image. Some moments I could tell you whose they are. Some examples I could tell you that she wants to be liked by everyone, but she speaks badly of others or sabotages situations secretly, criticizes others for their mistakes, but she herself can be controlling or manipulative or emotionally dishonest. That's it. But in the most exhausting aspects for them is that Marinette is stuck in a storyline cycle that never changes. Like each season repeats the same formula. La first chiquita. Third, she plans to confess her love to Adrien. Unfortunately, something interrupts her or she sabotages it herself. She acts clumsily again or makes incoherent decisions. She ends up frustrated and everything returns to the starting point. It's a formula that tires, especially because other characters do show growth. Marinette, on the other hand, seems not to learn from her experiences. It feels stagnant, which affects the credibility of her development as a protagonist. I know they do it to squeeze as much as they can from the franchise, since if she evolved quick, it wouldn't be interesting. But with the new animation, these loops are visible, which becomes very tiring. The most painful thing is she could be a great character. She has everything to be one: an iconic design, an interesting background, a well-developed romantic conflict, a secret identity with a lot of play in the story, but the script limits her. Instead of letting her evolve, it keeps her trapped in a bubble of insecurity and repetitive decisions. This has prevented her from shining as this protagonist, unlike other strong female characters in this genre. But if you want to see the best version of this character, seriously, go watch the movie. Hopefully they'll release more, but you can share your point of view. I invite you to watch more of my videos. Some of them might interest you. Come on, what are you waiting for?